You wake up, and within 60 seconds it starts. The phone, the notifications, the low-grade anxiety humming beneath your ribs like a motor that never shuts off. And before you've even put your feet on the floor, your mind is already somewhere else, replaying yesterday's conversation, rehearsing tomorrow's confrontation, bracing for something you can't name. Most people call this a mourning. The Stoics would call it a surrender. Because here's the costly mistake almost everyone makes. You spend your energy fighting things you cannot change, and you fold on the one thing you actually can. You rage at the traffic. You replay the insult. You try to rearrange other people's character like furniture in a room you don't own. And then, when it comes to your own mind, your own discipline, your own response, you shrug and say that's just how you are. You've got it backwards. You've been fighting the wrong war your entire life. And the truth nobody wants to say out loud is that this is costing you everything. It's costing you your peace. It's costing you your relationships. It's costing you the version of yourself you could have become by now, but haven't. Because you keep pouring your energy into battles that were never yours to fight. So here's the thesis, the one idea I want you to hold on to for the next 20 minutes, and probably long after. Accept the event, refuse the interpretation. The circumstance is indifferent. Your assessment of your own capacity is the one thing you control. Everything flows from that. Let me say it again, because it's going to sound too simple at first and too difficult by the end. Accept the event. Refuse the interpretation. The circumstance is indifferent. Your assessment of your own capacity is the one thing you control. Now let's break that open. There's a moment that Epictetus keeps returning to, a principle so foundational that if you stripped Stoicism of everything else, this single idea would still stand on its own. Some things are up to you. Some things are not. Your judgments, your intentions, your desires, your aversions, these are yours. Your body, your reputation, your possessions, the weather, other people's opinions, the economy, the past, the traffic, the text message that hasn't been returned. These are not. And the entire architecture of a sane life depends on knowing the difference. Not in theory, not as a quote you saved on your phone. In real time, when it matters, when your chest is tight and your pride is on fire and every cell in you is screaming that this isn't fair. That's when the test begins. Because here's what nobody tells you about acceptance. Most people hear acceptance and they hear surrender. They hear giving up. They hear lying down and letting the world walk over you. That's not what this is. Acceptance, in the Stoic sense, is not passivity. It's precision. It's the radical, almost violent act of looking at reality exactly as it is, without flinching, without adding your commentary, without insisting it should be different. The past cannot be changed. The present moment is what it is. Even the gods, Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, cannot undo what has already happened. So when you lie awake at 2 in the morning replaying a conversation from 3 years ago, rewriting your lines, imagining what you should have said, you are not solving anything. You are worshiping a ghost. You are burning fuel in a car that isn't moving. And the energy you spend wishing things were different is energy stolen from the only place you can actually act, right now. Think about how much of your suffering is manufactured this way, not by events themselves, but by your insistence that events should have been different. Someone betrays you. That hurts. But then you add the layer. They shouldn't have done that. People shouldn't be like that. I shouldn't have trusted them. The world shouldn't work this way. And each of those additions multiplies the pain. The betrayal was a fact. The rest is interpretation. The rest is you arguing with reality, and reality doesn't negotiate. Epictetus understood this at a level most people never reach. He was born a slave. He was beaten so severely his leg was permanently damaged. He was exiled from his home. And from that wreckage, he built a philosophy that didn't depend on circumstances being good, because his circumstances were never good. He didn't demand that reality match his expectations. He adjusted his expectations to match reality. And in that adjustment, he found something most people never find even with every advantage: freedom. But here's where it gets complicated. Because there's another tradition, another current running alongside this one. And if you've ever pushed yourself past what you thought was possible, you felt it. It says, your limits are not facts. They're stories. And stories can be demolished. David Goggins talks about taking souls. He means the practice of refusing to let your mind break before your body does. Of weaponizing discomfort against your own excuses. Of running toward the thing that hurts and staying there until the hurt becomes familiar, until the familiar becomes fuel. And there's a truth in that the Stoics would recognize, even if the language is different. Because the Stoics weren't soft. They didn't believe in comfort. They believed in voluntary hardship. Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself, at dawn, about the kind of people he'd have to deal with that day. The rude, the arrogant, the deceitful. And instead of hoping they'd be different, he prepared himself to meet them as they were. Seneca practiced poverty deliberately, setting aside days where he'd eat the cheapest food, wear the coarsest clothes, and live as if everything had been taken from him, just to prove to himself that he could survive it. Epictetus told his students to imagine the worst that could happen and then live as if they'd already survived it. This is not acceptance as surrender. This is acceptance as armor. So now you have two ideas pulling in apparently opposite directions. On one side, accept what you can't control. On the other, demolish the limits that most people accept. On one side, stop fighting reality. On the other, fight the voice that says you can't. And here's the question that sits at the center of everything. The question that the entire Stoic test hinges on. Is your limit a fact to accept or a story to demolish? And how do you tell the difference in real time? Because getting this wrong is expensive. If you accept a story as a fact, you quit too early. You live your whole life inside a cage you built yourself, calling it the world. And if you demolish a fact as if it's a story, you'll break yourself against reality like a wave against a cliff. You'll exhaust yourself fighting things that were never going to move. So how do you know? Here's the test, and it's simpler than you think. Ask yourself one question. Is this about the event, or is this about me? If it's about the event, the weather, the economy, other people's choices, the past, the traffic, the diagnosis, the rejection, accept it. Not because it's good, not because it doesn't hurt, because it's real, and fighting the real is a waste of the only thing you have, your energy, your attention, your response. But if it's about you, your capacity, your discipline, your courage, your willingness to endure, then the story that says you can't is not a fact. It's an interpretation, and interpretations can be refused. Let me give you a concrete example. You're in a difficult conversation. Someone is attacking you, misrepresenting you, refusing to understand. The event is, this person is saying these words. That's a fact. Accept it. Don't waste energy wishing they were different. Don't rehearse a fantasy version of them. They are who they are, right now, in this moment. But now the interpretation kicks in. I can't handle this. I'm not strong enough. I'm going to lose my temper. I always fall apart. That's not a fact. That's a story you've been telling yourself, probably for years, and every time you've told it, you've made it a little more true. The Stoic test says, accept the event. This person is attacking you. Refuse the interpretation. You are not someone who falls apart. You are someone who has fallen apart before and survived it, which means you are someone who can endure. The circumstance is indifferent. Your assessment of your own capacity is the one thing you control. Now let's go deeper, because this isn't just about conversations. This is about the architecture of your entire life. Think about the patterns you keep falling into. The same kind of relationship, the same kind of conflict, the same kind of self-sabotage. You tell yourself it's just who you are. You tell yourself you can't change. You tell yourself this is your nature, your personality, your wiring. And maybe some of it is. Maybe there are facts about you that aren't going to change. But how do you know which ones? How do you know the difference between a fact and a story you've mistaken for a fact? Here's what I think the Stoics understood and most people miss. You don't find out by thinking about it. You find out by testing it. You don't discover your limits by sitting in a chair and reasoning about them. You discover them by walking to the edge and then taking one more step. That's what voluntary hardship was for. Not punishment, not self-flagellation. Testing. Seneca didn't practice poverty because he hated himself. He practiced poverty because he wanted to know the truth about himself. He wanted to test the story that said he needed comfort, that he needed luxury, that he couldn't survive without his wealth. And when he tested it, the story collapsed. The fact remained. He was a human being who could endure. Marcus Aurelius didn't write his meditations because he enjoyed philosophy as a hobby. He wrote them because he was the most powerful man in the world, surrounded by sycophants, carrying the weight of an empire, dealing with plague and war and betrayal. And he needed to test himself every single day against the temptation to become a tyrant. Every morning, he reminded himself of what he'd face. Every night, he reviewed whether he'd met it. That's a test. That's a man checking whether his limits are real or imagined. Every day, in the most high-stakes environment imaginable. And here's what the test reveals if you're honest enough to take it. Most of your limits are stories. Not all, but most. You think you can't wake up early. You can. You think you can't endure cold. You can. You think you can't be alone with your thoughts. You can. You think you can't handle criticism without flinching. You can. You think you can't keep your composure when someone insults you. You can. You just haven't tested it. You've been accepting an interpretation as a fact, and that acceptance has cost you years of your life. But, and this is crucial, the test also reveals the real limits, the ones that are facts, and those you accept, not with resignation, with clarity. You accept them the way a craftsman accepts the properties of wood. You don't argue with the grain. You work with it. This is where the Goggins approach and the Stoic approach meet, and it's a beautiful convergence when you see it. Taking souls means refusing the interpretation that says you're done. Acceptance means embracing the event that is actually happening. Put them together and you get something devastating. You stop wasting energy on what you can't change, and you pour all of that saved energy into what you can. Most people do the opposite. They spend 90% of their energy fighting reality, arguing with the past, resenting the present, dreading the future, and then they have nothing left for the one thing that matters, their own response. They're exhausted before they even begin, and then they wonder why they still don't feel whole, why they still don't feel like themselves. Why, despite all the self-care and all the comfort and all the reassurance, there's a hollow space inside that nothing fills. Here's what nobody tells you about that hollow space. It's not a lack of comfort. It's a lack of self-respect. And self-respect isn't something you feel. It's something you build through discipline, through keeping your word to yourself, through testing your limits and finding out they were lies, through accepting what you can't change and refusing to accept the story that says you can't change. Every time you keep your word to yourself, every time you say you'll wake up early and you do, every time you say you'll stay calm and you do, every time you say you'll endure and you do, you deposit something into an account that most people don't even know exists. The account of your own self-respect. And when that account is full, the hollow space closes. Not because the world got better, because you got honest. You stopped lying to yourself about what you can and can't do. You stopped pretending that comfort was the same as happiness. You stopped confusing acceptance with weakness and endurance with cruelty. Let me bring this back to something practical. Something you can use today, not someday. The next time you're in a situation that's testing you, and it could be anything, a difficult email, a confrontation, a moment of temptation, a wave of anxiety, a failure, run the test. Step 1, name the event. Just the event. No interpretation. What is actually happening? Someone said something. A plan fell through. A number on a screen was lower than you wanted. That's it. That's the event. Step 2. Separate the interpretation. What story are you telling yourself about this event? I'm a failure. I always mess this up. I can't handle this. This always happens to me. That's the interpretation. Step 3. Ask, is this about the event or about me? If it's about the event, accept it. The plan fell through. Fine. What now? If it's about you, refuse the interpretation. You are not a failure. You are someone who failed once. You are not someone who can't handle this. You are someone who hasn't handled this yet. The circumstance is indifferent. Your assessment of your own capacity is the one thing you control. Do you see how this changes everything? Do you see how this one distinction, if you actually practiced it, would eliminate most of your unnecessary suffering? Because most of your suffering isn't from events. It's from interpretations. It's from the story you tell yourself about what the event means. And that story is not a fact. It's a choice. And it's the one choice that matters. Now I want to talk about the harder question, the one that keeps people up at night. What about the things that genuinely break you? Not the minor frustrations. Not the daily friction. The real losses. Death. Betrayal. The thing that happened to you that you've never told anyone about. The thing that shaped you in ways you're still discovering. Can you accept that? Should you? Here's what I think the Stoics understood about this, and it's not what most people think. They didn't say accept it and move on. They didn't say it doesn't matter. They said, the event happened. It is real. It is part of the world. And your suffering comes not from the event, but from your insistence that it shouldn't have happened. That's the interpretation you need to refuse. Not the pain. The pain is real. The interpretation, that the world should have been different, that you deserved better, that this shouldn't be part of your story, that's what's killing you. Because the world was never going to ask what you deserved. The world just is. And your freedom lives in the gap between what happens and how you respond to it. Not in controlling what happens, in controlling the response. Epictetus would say, the event is not up to you. Your character is. The loss is not up to you. Your relationship to loss is. The betrayal is not up to you. Whether you become bitter or better is. And that's the test. That's always the test. Not whether you can prevent bad things from happening. You can't. Whether you can meet them without surrendering your character. Whether you can be broken by an event and still refuse the interpretation that says you are broken. Because there's a difference between being broken and being defeated. Being broken is an event. Being defeated is an interpretation. You will be broken, many times, by things you can't predict and can't prevent. That's the cost of being alive. But you don't have to be defeated. You don't have to turn the event into an identity. You don't have to let the worst thing that happened to you become the truest thing about you. That's a choice, and it's yours. Let me bring this full circle because I want you to feel the weight of what I'm saying, not just understand it intellectually. You've been living with a confusion that's been quietly destroying you. You've been fighting events you can't change and accepting stories about yourself that aren't true. You've been spending your energy in all the wrong places, arguing with reality, rehearsing grievances, trying to control other people, replaying the past, and then wondering why you feel so depleted, so unfulfilled, so far from the person you know you could be. The fix is not more comfort. The fix is not more affirmation. The fix is a single discipline practiced until it becomes who you are. Accept the event. Refuse the interpretation. Say it to yourself when the phone buzzes and the anxiety starts. Accept the event. Refuse the interpretation. Say it when someone insults you and your blood runs hot. Accept the event. Refuse the interpretation. Say it when you're staring at something hard and the voice in your head says you can't. Accept the event. Refuse the interpretation. The circumstance is indifferent. Your assessment of your own capacity is the one thing you control. And if you practice this, not perfectly, not every time, but consistently, over months and years, something shifts. You stop being a victim of events. You stop being a prisoner of interpretations. You become someone who meets reality as it is and still stands, still endures, still chooses. And that, more than any comfort or achievement or reassurance, is what it means to feel whole. Not because nothing bad happens to you, because nothing bad that happens gets to define you. You define you through your response, through your discipline, through your refusal to surrender the one thing that was always yours, your character. So the next time life tests you, and it will, probably sooner than you think, remember the test. Accept the event. Refuse the interpretation. Meet reality as it is. And then decide who you're going to be in response to it. That's not a quote. That's not a platitude. That's an operating system. And it works. It worked for a slave with a broken leg. It worked for an emperor with the weight of the world on his shoulders. It worked for an exile who had nothing left to lose. And it can work for you. But only if you use it. Only if you stop reading about it and start practicing it. Only if you take the test. Accept the event. Refuse the interpretation. Choose growth over ease.